Welcome to Hello Therapy, a podcast to help you take charge of your mental health through evidence-based psychological tips and tools straight from the therapy room so that you can live life better. Does your mind spiral into a mess of worry sometimes? Maybe it feels like all you do is worry. Well, in today's episode, I am going to explore with you the question of why you might be worrying so much, and most importantly, what you can do about it. I am your host, Dr. Liz White, consultant clinical psychologist with over 20 years experience in mental health. So I'm going to take you through 4 key beliefs that underlie worry and keep it going. And stick around towards the end because I'll be sharing some tips on how to finally get a grip of excessive worry. And just a quick reminder, as a new podcast show, follows and reviews are really important to help us reach new listeners. So please do hit that follow button and tell us what you think by leaving a review. It would be really appreciated. Now, over on Threads, I recently put the question, tell me one thing that you worry about in your life. And the answers, as you would expect, were really varied, but there were some key themes. So money worries was a theme, worrying about being a good enough parent was a theme, worrying about their kids' future, climate change worry was in there, and also people worrying a lot about retirement and whether they have enough money. And I think that this really reflects the world that we live in now. The last few years have been really rough, haven't they? With a global pandemic, economic instability, war and conflict, to name just a few things. So even though I'm going to focus on the more internal mechanisms of worry, it's super important to hold in mind that we live in a socio-economic and political context, and that context might be slightly different for all of us. I know we have listeners from across the globe, especially Australia and the USA, but that context in of itself can create uncertainty, instability, and essentially anxiety, and can give us things to worry about. So just bear that in mind as I go through. But first, let's think about what worry actually is. So the definition that I think fits the best is that worry is a chain of thoughts and sometimes images for some people about potentially adverse future events, which causes anxiety and apprehension. And of course, as my Threads post proved, I think we can all worry sometimes. But when worry is excessive or it's out of proportion to a particular situation and detrimentally impacts a person's life, it's much more likely to be thought of as generalized anxiety disorder, or GAD for short. And GAD is common. It currently affects 1 in every 25 people here in the UK. So one of my favourite metaphors about worry is this. Worry is like a rocking chair. It is something for your mind to do, but it doesn't actually get you anywhere. In fact, not only does it not get you anywhere, but it can be incredibly distressing and cause a significant amount of anxiety. Now, worry has a certain quality to it whereby we can get very stuck very easily because one worry leads to another worry, leads to another worry. And sometimes I call this the worry spiral, or going down the worry rabbit hole. And it has this quality because our minds have this amazing ability to imagine things. So we can start out worrying about how am I going to pay the electricity bill this month, and then minutes later end up imagining losing our home and ending up homeless. And of course, the result of that is anxiety and stress. And most of the time, we tend to focus on the content of our worries. So what the worry is actually saying will happen in an imagined scary future. But to understand why we keep getting stuck in unhelpful worry spirals, we need to look at our underlying beliefs about worry. Now, these beliefs may or may not be something that we are aware of or particularly conscious of, but I would encourage anyone who experiences excessive worry to reflect on whether the following beliefs are a factor in keeping the worry going. So the first belief is this: being a worrier means I am a good person or means I'm a better person. So let me ask you, what does being a worrier actually mean about you? So just consider whether any of the following statements resonate with you. Worrying means I am a thoughtful person. Worrying means I'm a caring person. Worrying means that I'm a good partner or a good parent or a good friend. So if you believe that worrying means something positive about you, it's going to be harder to reduce the worry habit because it's tied to your self-esteem and the view that you hold of yourself. So for example, if you believe that worrying means that you're a good parent, then not worrying might mean to you that you're therefore not a good parent or even a terrible parent. And there may be a sense that you have to worry in order to keep your child safe. But here is something to bear in mind. Worrying is something that your mind does. It does not mean anything about you as a person. So let's imagine for a moment, if you had a magic wand and you could magic away worry for the rest of your life, would you suddenly become a bad partner, bad friend, or bad parent? Would it mean that you would somehow lose your ability to be a thoughtful or caring person? Of course not. How much you engage in the act of worry doesn't have any bearing on what sort of friend, parent, or person you are. So let's move on to the next underlying belief that might be keeping the worry habit going for you. Worrying helps me feel more in control. So let me ask you this: does engaging in worry make a difference to how in control you feel? So maybe the act of worrying helps you feel that you can cope with what life is throwing at you. Maybe it helps you feel prepared for unexpected life events. Maybe it helps you gain a sense of certainty in an uncertain world. And often worrying can come as a result of a real life problem that has shown up in your life. So for example, you've just learned that your partner needs a major operation, and of course, a very stressful thing to go through. And I think it would be really natural for anyone's mind to go into overdrive with anxious thoughts and worry. So the worry spiral with this situation may look like this. What if the operation doesn't work? What if my partner dies on the table? If he does die, how would I manage financially? How would I cope with the kids? How would I tell the kids? What if I couldn't work? What if we then lose the house? And so on. So here is the thing. Worrying doesn't actually help you control your life or control the problem. Doing something about the situation, about the problem, helps you more. So your mind may have convinced you that worrying helps you feel more in control or helps you solve problems, but consider what your excessive worry is actually costing you. It's probably taking up a lot of your time and energy and is almost certainly creating anxiety for you. So instead of wasting that time and that energy worrying about what might or might not happen, refocus on what you can control in a given situation. And what you can control is where you focus your attention and the actions you take next. So with the example I just gave, instead of wasting time worrying about all of the horrible possibilities that might happen and getting stuck in all of the what ifs, a much better use of your time and energy is to sit down and work the problem through. So, what are the actual facts? What have the medical professionals told me about the operation in terms of risk and so on? What support am I going to need at the time of the operation in terms of childcare, or what emotional support do I need? Do I want someone with me at the hospital whilst I'm waiting? Does my work need to know what's happening? Do I need to have a conversation about taking time off with my manager? And so on. So even though, of course, there will be anxiety and stress surrounding an event like this, and it's really important to acknowledge that, it's not going to help you getting stuck in that worry spiral, but working the problem through, coming up with solutions, coming up with a plan of how you're going to manage this stressful situation is going to help you more. And what this really points to is the difference between a real life problem that you're worrying about and a hypothetical situation that you're worrying about. Now, of course, we're going to have problems that crop up for us and that we end up worrying about. In that situation, it's great to sit down and work out a plan and commit to that plan and what you're going to do. With any hypothetical worry where your mind is going off into a scary imagined future, that is definitely not helpful for you. And that is when you need to employ some different tactics in managing your mind, which I'm going to talk about in a little while. So moving on to a belief that is closely linked to the previous one, the belief that if I worry, it will in some way prevent bad things from happening to me or to my loved ones. And in this situation, what we tend to do is we think through every eventuality and what we can do to mitigate any risks. And that somehow means, in your mind, that the feared consequence is less likely to happen or won't happen at all because you've worried about it. Now, this type of worry also shows up for people who experience obsessive compulsive disorder or OCD, because compulsions and rituals can develop out of the rule, I must worry and ruminate on things in order to keep people or keep myself safe. And sometimes this type of worry is referred to as magical thinking. So the belief that your thoughts can in some way cause, stop, or influence external events or situations. And this particular thinking style can be really unhelpful because essentially you get stuck. You feel that you need to keep worrying in order to keep yourself or others safe. You feel like it's protecting you. And if you believe this deep down, it's very hard to stop the worry. Now, if this resonates with you, I am guessing that worry and overthinking is a huge part of your daily experience. And I want to ask you something. Let's assume, just for a moment, that your thoughts or the worry doesn't have any bearing on external events or situations. It makes no difference to whether you do well in that job interview or how well your partner's operation goes, or it doesn't make any difference to preventing illness in your family. How would that change things for you? What would that be like, to wake up, go about your day without that constant need to worry things through, to sort of feel like you're trying to prevent something bad from happening all the time? Can you imagine that? And I wonder whether you could start to loosen your grip on the idea that you need to plan, prepare, think through every possible outcome. And maybe you could start with once a day, noticing when your mind starts to spiral, name it as a worry or name it as magical thinking, and remind yourself, worrying like this helps keep me stuck in anxiety and overthinking. And then refocus your attention in that moment on something more helpful or more useful or more meaningful to you. So start with this once a day, and then after a couple of weeks, take stock. What has happened as a result of me catching the worry once a day and refocusing? Okay, on to the last underlying belief that can maintain worry. Worrying is uncontrollable, or I cannot control worry, or worry controls me. So a common negative belief about worry is that worry cannot be controlled, and this is commonly referred to as type 2 worry or worry about worry. So worrying about worry has been shown to exacerbate and maintain worry, and people who hold those beliefs are much more likely to experience GAD. And let's be real, worry about worry is really tough. It can cause a lot of anxiety because not only are you feeling anxious about the original worry that showed up, you have more anxiety piled on top of that because now you're worrying about the fact that you're worrying. And I've worked with clients who really do feel like the worry controls them, and that is a really scary place to be. So what I say here is that we can't really control our thoughts. Think of your mind like a supercomputer that produces output, data, thoughts all day. We have thousands of thoughts per day. So although we can't control that, what we can control is what we do with those thoughts. And this is where the idea of cognitive defusion comes in. Now, I've alluded to this earlier, but it's essentially a key skill in managing your mind and improving your mental health. And I personally find it really helpful in my own life, and my clients also find it really helpful. So let me talk you through how you can apply it to managing worry. So let's take the thought, I can't control my worry, it will never stop. Now that is a negative thought that your mind has produced. It is essentially language in your mind. And here is the thing, you do not need to pay attention to it. You can acknowledge it as something that's shown up, that's unhelpful, and then you can shift your attention to something that is more helpful or useful to you. It's a bit like if you are scrolling on your social media feed, and when we're scrolling, we are flicking through various bits of information, and there'll be something that catches our eye, and then we might stop, we might like the post, we might pop a comment on there. Now, anxious thoughts or worries are a bit like those posts that pop out at you. Anxious thoughts and worries are always going to be things that grab your attention because they cause anxiety. And what then happens is you spend longer caught up with them. You believe them to be true. So it's a bit like with a post that you've stopped scrolling on. You're reading the caption, you're immersed in that particular post and what it's saying to you. It's the same with anxious thoughts. And what we want to help you do is, instead of getting captivated by that particular anxious thought or worry, we just want you to scroll on past. You don't need to engage with it. You can recognize that it's an anxious thought. You can recognize that it's a worry that's trying to hook you in, it's trying to captivate your attention, but you can just scroll on through. You do not need to engage with it. And sometimes we call this unhooking. So anxious thoughts and worries have this great quality to them where they hook you in, they reel you in, and we're trying to get you to unhook, essentially. Now, you may be able to do this for a few moments, to unhook for a few moments or minutes, or perhaps several hours go past. But anxious thoughts and what if worries are very good at hooking you. They really grab your attention and pull you down that rabbit hole. And the trick is to keep being consistent with unhooking. So we're trying to help you recognize in real time when you're starting to go down that rabbit hole, and B, unhook, disengage from the worry and treat it like any other thought. Almost like it's the equivalent to a really mundane or neutral thought about the weather, say. So we're moving from the content to the process of your thinking. Now, to help you with this, you might say something like, here's a worry. Or I'm noticing that I'm spiraling here. Or look at that, I'm falling down the worry rabbit hole again. Okay, instead of doing that, what I'm going to do is engage in something that's more helpful to me. And in the case of a real life problem that needs solving, it would be, as I said before, problem solving, figuring out a plan and committing to following that plan through. And if it's a hypothetical worry, you can just unhook and move on. And finally, I'm going to leave you with a couple of tried and tested defusion or unhooking strategies. The first one is really simple. It's just writing the worries down. And I think it works better if you actually physically write the worries down. And once you've written them down, just have a look at them. And instead of getting caught up with the meaning of those sentences, i.e. what the worry is actually saying, try to experience those worries a little bit differently. So notice your handwriting and the way that you've written those letters to form words, to form sentences. And what this does is it just helps you step back and go, oh, okay, actually, yeah, these worries that were in my mind a moment ago are now actually just words on a page. And that's all they are. Now, another way of diffusing from our thoughts is to sing them. Now, I quite like this diffusion strategy. It's a bit lighthearted. It brings in a little bit of lightness to it because with worry and anxious thoughts, we tend to hold on to thoughts quite tightly. And the way that I like to do this is to think about my favourite music artist and how they would sing the thought. So you can sing the thought in your mind or even out loud. And what that does is it changes the meaning. It changes the quality of that worry. And that brings us to the end of this episode. Do let me know how you get on with some of the tips and strategies that I've shared today. And if you want me to cover a particular topic on the podcast, just pop me an email at contact@harleyclinical.co.uk. Thank you for listening to this episode of Hello Therapy. If you found it helpful, don't forget to subscribe, follow, and review. You can get more wellbeing and mental health tips by joining our email list and visiting the resources section of our website at harleyclinical.co.uk. The Hello Therapy podcast and the information provided by me, Dr. Liz White, is solely intended for information and educational purposes and does not constitute personalised advice. Please do reach out to your GP or a mental health professional if you need support. Until next time, take care of yourself.